Hi, I'm Brent Feldman, and we are back with another episode of Mix and Matchbox. Today, I am joined by Jonathan Baktari, CEO of eNational Testing, as well as some other organizations, but looking forward to getting into the chat. Hi, Jonathan. How are you doing?
Hi, welcome. Thanks for having me, by the way.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I appreciate it. Looking
Thanks,
forward
Brent.
to jumping into the questions.
Okay.
I'll start with the first one here, which is just, switching from, system medical director to a full-time CEO is a
Mhm.
definite, significant career jump. What pushed you to starting E7 Health?
Well, the good news is it wasn't just overnight. I think there was a big transition period where or I slowly transitioned from clinical medicine to administrative medicine and then to starting our own company. So it wasn't like, waking up one morning and saying, wow, ready for a change. So it's almost, it was so transitional over quite a few years that it sort of evolved, and there wasn't any one day where we made the decision. I think one door kept opening other doors, and that kept opening other doors, and next thing you knew, we were knee deep into E7 Health, and we went from there.
That's awesome. Anything you miss about that prior career?
You know, of course, I miss some aspects of the clinical medicine. But to be very frank with you, each had its own challenges and each had its own, upside and downside. So it's just another chapter in a book, and I enjoyed that, and of course, I'm enjoying this. So uh, I want to say that both have their upsides and fun parts, and some downsides, of course. But yeah, they're both exciting.
Awesome. Well, that's cool. I guess you have multiple brands, and I know that we talked about this just before we started the podcast here. From eNational Testing, E7 Health, and U.S. Drug Test Centers. Where do you feel like is the strength in having multiple brands, kind of like as opposed to just one sort of central brand?
Well, it's not as random as it seems because we started with E7 Health, which was regional in Southern Nevada with brick and mortar, and U.S. Drug Test Centers and eNational Testing is our way of taking that business nationally. So they're sort of sister companies, and they're related in the sense that U.S. Drug Test Centers and eNational Testing does a lot of what E7 Health does, but we've connected to a network of labs uh, around the country. So it allows us to have a national reach, whereas E7 was more regional. So they're related. So it's not just random one company after another. I want to say they're offshoots, or let's call them sister companies, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess was there, something in your previous medical career that really helped you find a gap in the marketplace where all of these companies sort of, you were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe, somebody's not doing this now. Was
Yeah.
there a light bulb moment?
Well, it wasn't a light bulb. It was, I think I just got to do different things in healthcare. So obviously I was a physician and I did the clinical aspects of seeing patients. I was a professor in 3 medical schools over my career. So I taught, to residents and interns and medical students. And then I went in the administrative side of medicine, as medical director and what have you. Um, and so seeing it from the teaching point of view, the administrative point of view, and then also I was medical director of insurance companies, health insurance companies. And so I got to see it from the insurance side, from the hospital side, from teaching, from the clinical side of seeing patients. And I think that sort of, circular view of healthcare allowed, I like to think, some insights that may not have come to me if I was just doing clinical medicine, if
Yeah.
that makes sense. Because once you're able to go into different corners of the same industry, it gives you insight that may have not been so obvious otherwise. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. No, that's really cool. Well, and I mean, like that is probably one of the most holistic views of healthcare, I guess, that you could in a way have. Which does it yields potential for you seeing things that other people just they might not pick up on. So that's kind of fascinating, and hopefully led you into, if not exactly what you're doing, a unique approach in how you see your current businesses.
Yeah, it certainly I'll tell you one thing. It tells you what you don't want to do. I mean, I'm not sure it like gives you the direction of like this is what you should do to make an impact in healthcare, but it certainly tells you don't do that if you want to have an impact, because that's a dead end, or there's too many barriers to doing that. So if you want to really make a difference in people's lives and impact people's health and their lives, you know, let's do something that will reach as many people and have the maximal impact without, potentially things dragging you down on your road there. So more than pointing me in the right direction, it's that definitely don't do that, and definitely don't do that, because that's not going to work well.
Yeah, it give you the things to kind of stay away from too. Actually, that leads really well into the next question, which is like, what does the public health side of testing and vaccination mean to you?
Well, one of the things we really understood when we first started E7 Health, I think the CDC publishes data every year, and this is before COVID, by the way, that there's about 50,000 vaccine preventable deaths in the United States annually. And there was nobody really focused on that. And we're talking about adult vaccinations, not children. So we realized that in preventive health, that we're missing this area where nobody was focused on preventive health for adults in terms of vaccinations. This is, of course, pre-COVID. Now everyone gets adult vaccinations, right? As I joke, we were a COVID company before COVID hit by about 10 years or more. So I think it was this idea that can we make an impact in preventative health by doing things like testing for some of these bugs that vaccines are available for, and giving the vaccines for travel and for student health and general health. And so, and also, I think everybody else who was doing that, they were doing it as a side hustle for whatever they were really doing. So they were doing primary care, and they were doing this preventive health on the side, or they were doing urgent care and they were doing some of these vaccines on the side. So there was nobody doing it as their main thing, at the exclusion of those. So we don't do primary care, we don't do urgent care, we don't see people who are sick if we refer them out. But we wanted to focus on just this preventative health and wellness. And we kept adding to that menu as it related to the things we were already doing. So we went into every book of business, as it were, that vaccines were involved: student health, travel medicine, general health, STD, because there's vaccines involved in STDs. So anything that vaccines were involved, we got into to see if we could make an impact in people before they got sick.
That's cool. And as you mentioned, there's a lot of preventable death that could, come from just, simply getting vaccinated. So there's definitely that kind of public health component to it. And I mean, like, this is more just like, your kind of personal feelings or personal thoughts, but like, from a public health standpoint, obviously testing is key. It's, it's integral to us kind of like, understanding risk. And I mean, as you mentioned, it became super evident in during COVID about, how we could sort of like, make those sort of strides in our healthcare in general. But like, is there anything that you kind of feel like we could still be doing better as a country in terms of, sort of like maybe from a preventative standpoint, in addition to testing, that you feel like is just like a baseline thing that maybe is just constantly overlooked?
Well, I mean, it kind of relates to the testing. I think it's just the barriers we have in healthcare to get what you need. So if you want to get tested, or if you want to get checked out, what does that involve? It's usually, calling an office, being put on hold, and they'll call you back in 24 hours, and you get an appointment for a month and a half later, and all this rigor, and then fill out a lot of forms, and then the insurance company approves it or denies it, and this and that, and it just seems like it's not like ordering a widget on Amazon, right? Where 3 clicks and the widget is there, right? Or see, and we wanted to make healthcare as close to the Amazon experience as possible, right?
Yeah.
We joke about having Amazon-esque companies, where everything's like 3 clicks away. I mean, and of course, healthcare is more complicated, but at least on some of the stuff, can you get an appointment with 3 clicks? Can you, get a lab test ordered with 3 clicks? Are you going to call and get a recording where it says press 1 for this department, press 2 for that department, press 3 for the medical records department, press 4, and after all those prompts, leave a message. We'll call you back 24. With that, I just think it creates a lot of friction in the system. And I mean, like when you think about buying a widget, right? Like, maybe in the old days, got to get in the car, drive to Home Depot, park the car, navigate Home Depot, go down all these aisles, find this widget that I need. I mean, I would guess a lot of people just say, you know what, I could probably live without that widget, or next time I'm in the neighborhood. But with Amazon, think of the widget and 3 clicks and you've got the widget. So we know that if we reduce friction in the system, people are more likely to get what they were thinking about getting. It's just kind of common sense. So, I mean, that's why Amazon is Amazon, because I don't think that they have better widgets, right? I think you're getting the same widget as you got at Home Depot, right? I mean, the same nuts and bolts that you want, or hammer, or whatever it is you're trying to order. But what is the value of Amazon? And the value is minimal friction.
They make it easy. Yeah. No, you're so right. And it's funny you use that word friction, because they coined that word, that frictionless, where you make the transaction just as easy as possible and as few clicks as possible.
Well, I mean, they store your credit card. I mean, remember before Amazon, you had to put your credit card in every single time, anytime you wanted to before Amazon really took off, as I recall. Like every time you had to put your address and phone number and this and that, and you still do with a lot of websites, but that alone, not having to put your credit card in every time, I think was really, it was like landing on the moon when it comes to e-commerce. I mean, it was a breakthrough, because initially e-commerce online was putting in your credit card every single time, right?
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's a wonderful sentiment, though, to think about, like just why can't we apply the same principles of like just making it easier for people? Because, and I think you're right that does create a lot of barrier and roadblock to people getting the service or the care they need. And it made me think of one more, kind of thing, which was just timeliness. If Amazon's getting it to your door in like, 2 days, 1 day, sometimes same day, which is crazy. Like I'm sure that plays a role in obviously the preventative aspect of public health, making sure that people don't spread a disease that they understand, that they know they have. So I mean, like that's another part of it is, and it sounds like you're kind of touching on that too, is like getting that care, making sure it's a fast pathway to get there. It can do a lot, and as opposed to the traditional healthcare model of we'll schedule you in for 2 months from now, and but that's super.
That's assuming you could get through, but that's
Wow. Well, I guess, one thing that, I guess you like to cover is, building an organization entirely on your own. And, this was very interesting to me because like I fortunately had like, the assistance of my business partner. Him and I have, kind of navigated this water for almost 18 years. And so like, I definitely had the help of somebody, but I like that, you like to talk about like building an organization from the ground up on your own. Are there qualities or skills that someone should come to the table with in order to be able to do this? Or can anyone be taught all those skills it takes to be able to architect a business on their own from the ground up?
Yeah, I like the way you phrase that question, because we talked about skill sets. I think I talk about this all the time. One of the biggest fallacies is that being a leader, meaning CEO of your own company or whatever, is a soft skill, right? So a lot of people think, yeah, well, it was my idea. I put up the money, so of course I should be the CEO. But that may be true. But you also pay for a plane ticket. They don't let you land the plane. I mean, right? I mean, you're going to need some technical skills. But I think people don't view being a leader in an organization as a hard skill like landing a plane. I just hang out. I'll talk to some people. I guess I'm a nice guy. People like me. I'm good with people, and so of course I'd be a great CEO. And what I'm saying, of course, and of course, if it is your money and it is your idea, you should be the CEO. But you should also know that you need to actually go acquire those technical skills. How do you build culture? How do you enroll people in your vision? How do you hire? How do you fire? How do you motivate? How do you how do you hold people accountable? How do you talk to people? You could have the same conversation with 10 people in your organization, but you can't deliver the message the same way to all 10. Some people don't like when you're direct. Some people don't like when you're not direct. Some people, you may have to beat around the bush a little. Some people you may have to, offer more support. Some people you have to offer less support. Just tell them what the problem is. And if you don't know how to calibrate just even that one thing, your conversations, how do you get tough with a vendor? How do you fire a vendor? How do you put a vendor on notice? How do you encourage a vendor? Sometimes it's not all about firing. It's getting their attention so they take you to the next level. These are not soft skills, because and of course people try to learn by fire, but you just want to hope that you don't make any fatal mistakes, right? That like destroys your building, your business. I'm sorry, before it gets to the next level. So it's a lot of stuff, and I think a lot of businesses fail sometimes because of money, but sometimes because the person there just didn't have the skill sets yet to navigate these early issues, right? So it becomes a problem. So you need to actually go out and acquire the skills. I equated with trying to play the violin, trying to land a 747. You're not intuitively going to know how to land a 747.
Absolutely. Wow. I appreciate that. And I feel like that's really important for, people who are business owners or, looking to be business owners. I feel like that's important for them to hear. Only, for the, pure and simple fact is that there are a lot of things, exactly as you were kind of rifling them off, that you kind of learn over time. And for a lot of business owners, it does become, trial by fire. But, I will say that, either mentors that I've had, definitely, people that have provided good lessons, other agency owners, as you and I were talking about before the podcast is always interesting in order to gain perspective, gain insight, and learn those skills, as you were saying, before it comes to a point where a wrong decision made can lead to something really problematic.
Yes, I would agree with that. And a lot of people have chosen the sort of, I'll learn it by making mistakes. But what you said about getting a mentor to help you navigate, especially early on, is really great advice. And honestly, that's one of the goals of the podcast we're doing this year, which is Crash CEO School, is we're actually taking those topics and saying, you don't have to make these mistakes, how to hire, how to fire, how to promote, how to build culture, how to mentor someone so they grow in your organization. Some people, you can't just hire them and put them in the corner office and see them 8 months later and assume they blossom into a leader in your organization, right? Very few people become a leader in any organization unless you spend time mentoring them. And I have one podcast where I coined the term don't micromanage, micro mentor, where you got to take, especially young people who have a lot of energy and potential and really want to grow, but they just need someone who's going to check in with them, sometimes daily, initially, and sometimes weekly, and then less. But yeah, I think this idea of hiring someone in marketing, throwing him in an office, and 8 months later, say, how's it going? That's usually not going to end well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. The ability for somebody else to have that sort of like, drive, the same sort of determination that, you do, as the business owner is not always necessarily there. And that's not that they're acting with malice at all, but it's that, they're just as, any business owner needs to acquire those skills, that person does too. And I love the idea of micro mentoring. Hopefully more, you get a lot of people tuning into that Crash CEO course, because I feel like that's, it's valuable skills that hopefully distilled, can really help a lot of people, because boy, there's a lot of things you learn along the way, that's for sure.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting because you don't think that it's going to involve so many skill sets, but as you all know, as anyone who's done it, just like, I wish I knew now. I mean, I wish I knew then what I know now, because you're like, oh my gosh, I can't even believe I took on this position not knowing what I know.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting that one of those skills is probably negotiation, and and I'm sure that you've handled plenty throughout the medical
Yeah.
experience,
Yeah.
all through other experiences that you had now as a CEO. So I'm a big fan of the book Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, and I feel like there's a lot of helpful negotiation tactics and things. And it's not all hard negotiation. It's not all hardball. It's there's a lot of like sort of understanding that you have to have approaching those situations. Do you have any sort of like keys or tips that you like to provide people who have to negotiate as a business owner or otherwise?
Yeah. Again, I actually did a couple of podcasts just on negotiating. One, negotiating when you don't have the leverage, and then negotiating when you do have the leverage. And sometimes it's 50-50. But the favorite phrase, which everyone's heard, which resonates well with me, is you have to understand when you get into business, this old saying that you don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate, right? So you're like, well, we're going to go in that negotiation meeting, but we deserve this. This seems fair to me. So we're going to ask for that because it's fair. I'm like, nobody cares if it's fair or not, because it's all about leverage. If you need them more than they need you, sometimes you're not going to get fair. You're going to get what they think you should get, given the fact that they have leverage, right? If you need that other person 10 times more than they need you, and they've got 20 people to pick from, you're not going to necessarily get what you deserve, right? So you can't walk in that meeting and say, well, simple strategy, we'll ask what we think is fair and what we deserve, and they'll give it to us because it seems fair to me. You have to understand the power dynamics of what's going on. And then, like my podcast, I come up with like 5-6 things that you need to do to be prepared to negotiate without leverage. Okay. And some of that, I can rattle off a few, but the gist of it is you got to go in prepared. Say, okay, we don't have any leverage. Okay. We need them a lot more than they need us. So what can we do to mitigate that? Or vice versa. We're going to go into a strategy meeting saying, hey, you know what? If this doesn't work out, there's 10 other companies we're going to talk to that we've already booked appointments with. So yeah, we're not going to pay more than this, and that's our bottom line. If they don't like it, we got 5 other meetings scheduled this week. Who cares? And you have to know that. You have to know that you're one of 8 people they're interviewing, and you can't go in there. So you have to come in some other way, right? And so you have to. So and I talk about that. For example, get to know them, understand what their issues are, understand what their business model, understand where they make their money. Like if you're negotiating with someone and they make their money by volume, they want volume. So you're gonna have to talk about how much volume you're going to give them. Versus some people are more focused on margin, or some people want to have a presence in a certain sector that helps them. So you have to understand what makes them happy and then focus on that, not just randomly go in there. We want to work with you. You say, well, if you work with us, I know you don't have a presence on the West Coast, and we're in the West Coast. We own the West Coast, and so I'm just making stuff up now, but you have to highlight what you think. And also we talk about, check everyone out on LinkedIn, get to know them prior to the meeting. If I had started this podcast by saying, oh my gosh, there's some great restaurants in St. Louis I always go to. Have you been to this? You would have instantly, I'm not saying it would have changed the negotiations, but you would have, and if there was somebody in common, if I went on your LinkedIn and saw that we had some common people we know, I think that's plus 100 more things might tip the scale, because at the end of the day, people not only want to make the best deal, but they want to work with someone they have a comfort level with. And there's no better way to get, we're human beings at the end of the day. We're business people, but we want to work with people that we have some connection to. Whether, and it's not the typical, oh yeah, you went to UCLA, I went to, that's sort of like typical what they teach you. But, I could have, researched you even more and had gone, if we were negotiating, and gone into this meeting, with a whole slew, you're talking about, watches and Switzerland or whatever, I could come out with that and have a whole, again, it's not fake. It's just to make a human connection. You have common interests, common people, people think that's not negotiate. That is part of the negotiation, especially when you don't have leverage.
Yeah.
Now, if you don't need any of that if you have leverage. Of course, it's gracious to do that even when you do. In my podcast, I talk about even when you have the leverage, pretend like you don't.
Cool.
Okay, pretend like you don't, and only pull that out if you need to. Because if you can do a deal without clubbing the other person over the head, those are the best deals, because not only will you get the deal, but they'll be happy to work with you, and they'll refer you to other people. And also one day I always talk about this too. The person you're negotiating with, you may think you have all the leverage in the world and you treat them badly. And one day they blow up. They're going to remember who is mean to them on the way up.
Yep.
Right? I mean, you do this a lot of times. One day someone's going to blow up.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, who's that agency we use? They were so mean to us. I'm just picking on you now. And they're like, oh yeah, no, we're not going back to them. Right? So, I mean, for many reasons, even when you have the leverage, it's better to not use it and just have a collegial back and forth and do a win-wins kind of thing. You never want to take everything off the table and leave nothing for them.
Mm-hmm.
And you can, when you have the leverage, you could grind them to the point where there's nothing left for them, but they'll have to take it anyway.
Yeah. It's not going to feel good for everybody.
But a lot of people don't think about that. And like I said, one day they may blow up, or the first chance they get to move on, they will. So anyway, it's this and 100 other dynamics that, about negotiations that you need to have in mind. If you just walk in cold, it's usually not going to end the way you think it's going to end.
For sure. Well, and actually that touches on, kind of like the next point here, which is like actually communication in general. And I know you like to emphasize like the importance of communication in leadership, and definitely in management too. Do you see some like, through lines between good communication with employees and good communication with customers that are universally important. And this, maybe tread a little bit on negotiation, because sometimes you're
Right.
negotiating with your employees internally on, like, what you need to get done, how they assess priorities, as well as just like, with your clients that you may have. But yeah, do you see any sort of like, connection about the between whether it's internal or external,
Yes.
those through lines?
Yeah. I totally agree with that. One of the things I harp on as to other leaders is, just because you're the boss, going in there and just barking out directions, or hey, we're going to do this, or we're going to do that. It's much better to have a back and, even though you've made, like, sometimes I'll go into a meeting with my senior staff and I'm hell bent on a certain decision. Like, that's the decision I want. So I could go in the meeting and say, guys, we're getting rid of that service and we're adding this service, and that's the way it's going to be. Now, that's what I want to say, but that's not what I'm going to say. So I'm going to go in there and say, listen, guys, let me ask you a question. Have we ever thought of what would happen if we added this service? Like, am I crazy, or would that be a win for us if we did that? And then have them. Now, this is not as diabolical as it seems, because sometimes I haven't thought of everything.
Mm-hmm.
So that gives them an opportunity to say, wait a minute, you're crazy. We get rid of that, it's also going to impact this and this and that. Oh, like, oh, I hadn't even thought of that. So this is another upside of not barking out, just direction, because sometimes you're wrong. Okay. And no one's going to tell you you're wrong if you go in and say, I've made the decision. I mean, yes, maybe, but still, to make people be part of the decision rather than you make the decision is so important. Even if you're hell bent on that decision, because there've been times I've been hell bent, and oh my gosh, I was proven so wrong. I mean, like, holy moly, I didn't even think of that, because they're in the weeds, they're living and breathing it, and you're like in your, virtual ivory tower coming up with these crazy ideas, which sound good, but when the rubber meets the road, it's maybe not such a great idea. So I think it's that, and also if you do move ahead with the idea and the idea goes south, if you are the one that pushed it 100%, as soon as it goes south, everyone's going to be like, see, yeah, that was that was Brent's bad idea, which I knew we shouldn't have done it, right?
Darn it.
Versus if they were part of the decision, one, they're going to try to salvage it as much as they can, right? Because they were in on the decision. When they're not in on the decision, there's no salvage mode.
Yeah.
Like, I knew it was a bad idea, and I hope he's happy. He forced us to do this. But if they were part of it, like, wait, what can we do to save this? Oh, I have an idea. Let's tweak this. Let's tweak that, because I was part of that bad decision. And let's see what we can do to salvage. And same thing when it goes up. When it goes well, they're like, you see it? I was part of that idea that went to the moon. I'm gonna contribute even more to this organization because I'm a part of the success. So whether it fails or succeeds, you get benefits both sides. If you include everybody, all the senior people that should be, and it also builds culture. They're like, okay, so I'm not on this top-down organization where people are just barking and telling me what to do.
You're part of a collaboration. Well, we're going to I'm going to get meta for a second. We're going to do some podcasting about podcasting. But my next question is actually, I know you do your own podcast. This is something you do as well. But what got you started in podcasting, and how do you feel like it either relates or touches, or was it just, something that you felt like you wanted to do?
I think it evolved. I think initially I was a guest on a lot of podcasts, and I just realized people were asking me, there was a running theme among the questions they were asking me, and I could like give little bits of it, like you may have brought up this negotiating thing. I'm a guess. How long can I talk about it? Like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes? I'm like, but I got more to say on negotiating. So I want to do a podcast on that where I can blab all about it. So I really got the idea because I would get off these shows and like, yeah, I mean, it's not their fault, but I mean, we have like a lot of stuff to cover. But I could just do a whole thing on, how to talk to employees, how to talk to your. I just did one, 20 phrases to use when you're trying to be inclusive of your organization. Just 20 key phrases, some of which I just use. And so I'm like, I don't want to just give one or two. I want to give it all. And so it was very cathartic to have that forum where I could blab about something and just cover it A to Z more or less.
That's very cool. Yeah, and I was actually encouraged by a member of our team to like give some personal perspective in there because it's interesting. You find these opportunities. You're having these great conversations. There's not time for everything, like, but at the same time, like you develop. It's kind of like that one thing that you're like, I could go on a tangent about that for forever.
Yes,
There's
yes.
so many other valuable pieces of information that you want to give. And and each episode doesn't necessarily give you that, but I don't know. Hopefully, there's fodder for each of us, respectively, after we have this conversation here.
Well, it's interesting because whenever my staff says, "So, what's that topic for this week?" Literally, it's like, "Hey, remember yesterday we were talking about this?" And they're like, "I want," So it's interesting how just activities of daily life in your organization, like some mistake happened a couple of days ago or some whatever, and that becomes a whole topic for
Yeah,
the next podcast. Yeah.
that's awesome. That's cool. Well, I have one last question for you, and it's an easy one. But as a Chicago native
Mhm.
and a lover of basketball, are you
Mhm.
still a Bulls fan in Vegas?
You know, I'm a little. First of all, I'm a huge Michael Jordan fan. Just, I mean, I think I have a shrine of basketball cards and autographs and all, and so I'm a huge Michael Jordan fan. And, I'm a little down on the NBA, to be very frank with you. It's not what it used to be. I kind of feel like it's not as much of a team sport as it used to be, and that's probably my own little editorial thing. So I think, but we're into hockey, and so of course we have the Stanley Cup champ Golden Knights here, so that's been fun for my whole family. And then of course
Nice
I still
feather in the cap.
yes, and of course I still follow the Blackhawks and Connor Bedard, and so so we love sports as a family, and we get into it, but basketball, I don't know. They need to probably tweak a few things.
Fair enough. I'm a Jordan fan too. So yeah, that was, I feel like, the golden heyday of the Bulls. And you'd really hope that something else really brings back or rekindles that kind of spirit. Obviously, if you're in Chicago, I'm sure you're probably going to be a Bulls fan regardless. But
Yeah,
yeah, I'm a Jordan fan as well. So yeah, it's hard to beat.
yeah. And actually, Jordan is. When I talk to people about metaphors of excelling as an owner or a CEO, sports can teach you a lot of lessons that extrapolate into business, right?
Mhm.
So just outworking everyone else and out hustling and mastering your craft and always having another gear. Jordan, always had one more gear if he needed it,
Yeah.
right?
The
And
Last Dance was a good,
yeah,
evident portrayal of that. Of like, you
right.
just saw him kind of take off when he needed to.
Right. Every time you think that there's no more, there's a little more you could do.
Hmm.
So, and I think I try to mentor younger leaders about that. Right. Just whenever you think you've given it everything, sometimes that's when you need to give a little bit more.
That's awesome. That's a good strong note to end on. I really appreciate you being with us on the podcast. Really, thanks so much for all of your thoughts and your insight, and definitely it was great to have you.
Thanks so much. It was a big honor. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. This has been another episode of Mix and Matchbox. I am your host, Brent Feldman. We will be back soon with more content. Please like and subscribe. Thank you.